Hello and welcome everybody to the Casual Spikes podcast, episode 15. I'm your host Dakota, aka Crowday23, here on YouTube. Joining me, as always, is my co-host Randy from Modern with Randy. Randy, how you doing tonight?
Doing well, doing well.
Sweet, surviving out there in a bird meta with all these
Yes.
wizards flying around.
Well, the good news is I don't win in leagues, so I never actually see the deck.
Never have a good enough record to see the Nadus at the top table. That's the
Yeah,
way
but
that you avoid the matchup.
we don't run into a round one. We're just understanding. It's okay.
Oh, jeez. Well, if that is any hint of what we're going to have in store for this episode tonight, we're going to be talking about some of the sweet decks from Pro Tour Modern Horizons 3 that didn't feature Nadu, because, of course, once we kind of talk about some of the sweet decks from the event, we're, of course, going to talk about the menace that has been dominating the modern metagame, and we'll look to continue to do so until morale improves. But, of course, before we get into any of that, and I actually typed it out so I remembered it for the first time. If you want more content from me or Randy, go ahead and check out our channels. You can subscribe to this channel to get more content from me. And if you want to see anything that Randy's doing over on his channel, where he focuses a lot on Modern and Pioneer, whatever the current RCQ season is, doing a lot of cool stuff over there. Go ahead, check it out. I'm going to have his channel linked in the description down below and probably annotated somewhere on the screen, so you'll be able to click it, go over there as well. Go over there and support him. He's making too many good videos to be not getting any subscribers. It's bullshit.
You can say that. I don't know if that's true, but you can say that.
I mean, like, I'm a fan. Like, I end up watching some of the videos. Like, my ADHD kicks in, and I do like 15 other things while I'm listening to it. But like, I watch the
I mean,
videos and stuff.
that's right. That's what happens with me. I'll have a stream going on my TV. I'll have my uh, a video or something playing on my computer. I'll be researching some kind of deck or something, and then also looking at Spice Rack to see what tournaments I can go to on Sunday, all at the same time. And then someone will text me. I'm like, try to do that too. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. But I watched 4 videos a stream today, I think.
That's true. I definitely watched like 28 hours worth of content in like a 12-hour period and remember about all of 5 minutes.
Sounds about right.
So, of course, in the modern meta of Pro Tour Modern Horizons 3, of course, we know that Nadu took over the meta game and stuff. Huge. We're not here to talk about that right now. There's some cool decks, some of the decks that we kind of picked out, and I look forward to talking about them and sharing some thoughts with Randy, because we've been kind of going back and forth on a lot of these, and I got to play a few of them as well. So they've been a lot of fun. They felt really powerful, and I think the perfect one to start off with is the deck that ended up getting the number one seed in the top eight, and actually in a way kind of dethroning Nadu in the mono black necro deck.
Yeah. So honestly, I talked about a lot about this actually in my breakdown of the Pro Tour, where I think this is the most not talked about deck because Nadu obviously showed stole the show with everything that was going on with it. But this deck is quite possibly going to be the best deck when Nadu eventually gets the ban hammer. Like, I don't think it's anybody. I don't think anybody's over here going Nadu's going to get banned. I haven't heard this yet. Like, people have talked about this to death. I'm sure we're going to talk about it here in a little bit too. But like, after Nadu eventually leaves the modern format, like this is going to probably be the number one best deck in the format. And it does everything you want to do. You draw cards, you interact with your opponent, you mess up their game plan, and you get to do damage along the way. Like this deck has everything you could possibly want for the low price of 3 swamps.
Yeah, this. So I've been kind of on the necro dominant, maybe not necessarily the train, but I've definitely been following it in my car, from a safe distance, because we. If you've been around competitive Magic, or if you're like me and you just watch like old Pro Tours and stuff, you know that like Necropotence is easily one of the most busted cards, and I think at the time was definitely one of the most underrated, considering it was considered the worst card in its own set. And it turns out it was like leagues better than anything else that you could have been doing in Ice Age. And the fact
You
that
stick your draw step.
that's true. You know what? It was like back then people didn't understand that like paying, and again, we have like 20 plus years of like, actually like 30 years of like hindsight to know that if you're paying one life to draw one card, that is like above rate. Like that is just amazing. And the fact that like Necro Dominance, like so like Necropotence, and this is kind of fun because I get to actually use my Necropotence like knowledge because like it's kind of the same for Necro Dominance in a way that with Necro you would always pay one life and you would draw up to max hand size like +1, and that way you like discard one card and you would always have like a full grip and you'd kind of have a choice of what you were going to do because you weren't going to have a draw step. And when I played the Necro Dominance deck, that's kind of what I did, or like the logic that I put in was in this case with all the free spells and stuff, drew up to 8 cards in hand because of cards like the Soul Spike and like March of Wretched Sorrow. You can just use those to like pitch cards that you would discard anyway to get some sort of effect out of them. You gain life and then you're able to draw more cards later, and that kind of like balances out the fact that again you paid so much life to draw so many cards. So I think that the fact that a lot of the necromath works out for Necro Dominance, and there's just a few more restrictions and everything like that on it, uh, it's kind of no surprise why it's probably one of the best like non-Nadu cards like in the format. Like it makes me so happy seeing this card do well because I just absolutely love the card Necropotence.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy. I think the biggest problem or like the biggest challenge with this deck is understanding how many cards do you draw and when do you draw them, right? Like, so like obviously it's really easy to figure out, when you're have like 20 plus life and have like 18 cards left in the library and your opponent's at 4. Well, I'm gonna draw all 18 cards and like kill you with one of my last remaining soul spikes. Like common sense, that's easy. But it's that early and mid game question of like, how many do I draw? Do I draw enough? What's like, where's my middle ground of how many should I be drawing each turn to combat whatever my opponent's doing, on top of like also just not pitching a bunch of spells that are gonna be good later in the game.
Yeah, and a lot of the situations require a lot of like analyzing. I mean, even like the game where you and me played, where we're playing like the control matchup versus like mono black, and there was definitely some pause as to like, well, I could draw down to like one life and potentially do this, but then there's also the case like, well, if I miss, there's like Flage ends up killing me, or like Flage, there's a bunch of different ways that it hurts you. So it's like kind of trying to remember those situations and not getting lost in the fact that like I just drew 17 cards, but if you miss on a soul spike or like a way to actually get rid of these cards, it ends up being a real cost because then you just can't properly use those resources because they're going to get discarded and then essentially hit the exile zone as well. They're not even going to hit the graveyard. So there's definitely a lot of play with this deck. I don't think it's just as easy, and I'm not saying anyone's saying it's this easy, as just like drawing equal to your life total -1 and then just figuring out a way to win the game from there. There's definitely a lot of interesting lines and stuff, and this is a deck that I look forward to kind of learning more about as we hopefully approach a Nadu ban in the near future.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see how this deck evolves and what it does overall. Because like I said, I've been a fan of this deck just from watching it. I really enjoyed watching like Seth Manfield play the deck. I think that he had the best version in the Pro Tour of it. I think that this deck wants to really rely on the flip cards for being able to hit a lot of your land drops. And I think that is what you want to do. You want to be able to live in that perfect world where you have all these spells that are also lands. And just this deck is the number one deck to take care, or not to take care of, but like to make use of that, right? Because after you hit like your 4th land drop, you pretty much don't care about lands. Like once you're able to cast Shieldred, once you're able to cast the One Ring, lands have no longer matter. You just want spells and abilities to pitch to and things of that nature. So being able to have, the like 25 lands total he was playing with only 11 real lands in the deck, quote unquote real lands. I think this gives you exactly what you want in this deck, where you have the land count to still hit on turn 3, turn 4, your land drops, and then just always are going to have gas after that, or theoretically always have gas.
Oh yeah, and like there's so many of these lands too where I believe it's the like Fell the Profane and the Bogart Trawler. You can pay 3 life, tap them to come into play untapped, and you don't necessarily need them to come and play untapped because unless you're like scamming on turn 1, or I guess trying to go for the Shamelin Gas into Phyrexian Tower, leave up mana for like March or Wretched Sorrow after you draw a bunch of cards sort of line, it's not important to have a turn 1 play. So the fact that like all these other lands kind of come into play tapped is like not really a downside, and the fact that they have the benefit too of being able to come into play untapped for the cost of 3 life as well. They're going to come into play untapped because you're going to be able to do something with the mana rather than just being stuck with a tap land, which and you're also right too, or the fact that it's just more black cards to pitch to your other cards that care about having black cards to them, especially since you're also playing the Force of Despair, and then of course 4 March, 4 Soul Spike. It just peak deck building, and it's kind of unfortunate that Seth wasn't able to beat Nadu at the in the top 8 to be able to see it play a little bit more.
Exactly. Like, I really enjoy, like, he only has 4 tap lands in his like 25 land deck, basically, which is the 4 rebirths.
Yep.
And I mean, like, we're only playing that, like, we're playing that because on the off chance we get to scam on turn 1, you want the rebirth. So I mean, it makes sense. But it's kind of crazy that he's able to play 25 lands essentially while only playing 11 real lands in the deck.
Oh yeah, it's a beautiful. This is a thing of art.
It is. Obviously, I think his sideboard's wrong, and that's more so because looking towards like the meta now and what you're gonna see in XYZ. So like I think his sideboard's probably wrong now, but it was probably correct going into the Pro Tour. But I think that's like gonna be the biggest change we're gonna see in this deck is maybe we'll see a couple different numbers change in the main deck. Obviously, I think if and when Nadu gets banned, we'll see Forces of Despair kind of hit the deck. Like that card's definitely in there for Nadu, so you can interact early on with it. Maybe we'll go up a couple more Flare Malice. Maybe we'll go up and play a couple more creatures like going back to Dolphy, possibly. Just kind of depends on what we'll see. Obviously, moving forward, but I think that for the most part, this deck is almost a perfect 60, give or take a couple cards that will change just because of the metagame changing.
Oh yeah, beautiful stuff. I absolutely love this deck.
Oh, for sure. This is definitely a deck I look forward to playing against and beating hopefully a lot with Jeskai Control.
Funny that you mentioned Jeskai Control. So the next deck, this deck theoretically, at least from the way the commentators made it sound and kind of some of the other players, that Jeskai, like the One Ring / like Jeskai like Energy Control, had a pretty favorable matchup against like the Nadu decks. And honestly, from being able to play the matchup from like the Nadu side of things, I can see why. And even watching the top 8 match where Javier immediately went up like 2-0 on Nadu, and it took a bunch of like critical misplays and then probably actually losing only one game to end up losing the match. But aside from that, like the Jeskai One Ring deck looked absolutely insane.
It did, and then even when we were playtesting that matchup, it like the One Ring deck never really felt too terrible in the matchup. Like I never felt like I was super far behind um, at all. I will say it's a little different. So I've been playing this deck a little bit more than um, anything else, and then I've been playing a deck. I've been playing it with not subtleties, but with
Solitude.
solitudes in the main, which I think I'm going to end up changing my list to a little bit differently as a whole. But I do think the deck is very solid as a whole from what I've played. Um, I will say that like you don't have a lot of like dead draws. I think the biggest problem with this deck is making sure you hit your land drops efficiently. And outside of that, though, Wrath the Skies is probably the most broken board wipe spell I've ever played. Like, just the fact that like I can go turn 1, tune the narrative, get 2 energy, turn 2, Galvanic Discharge, kill like a next 2 or next 1, have 3 energy, and then go into turn 3 and just wipe the board of 4 drops for 3 mana. Like, it's unreal.
Oh yeah. And usually like wraths I think are judged pretty well on playing them on curve, where we see like Supreme Verdict, like, oh, it's uncounterable and you get to play it on turn 4, so it's like all the other wraths. Even some other cards too that were like 3 mana wraths had some downside, 5 mana wraths with a little bit of upside. And the fact that it's essentially whatever you want it to be, where in the late game, like even on turn 4, turn 5, you pay double white, you don't pay additional to the X cost, you wipe away, the twos and threes with the energy that you've collected from all these other spells, and then you're also leaving up like counterspell. You're leaving up things like what was it, invert polarity. Like any of the other like
Yeah.
kind of counter spells, force and negation and whatnot. Like you're just leaving up like interaction on top of just getting to wipe the board and essentially stop your opponent from putting pressure on you immediately with some kind of interaction. So just absolutely awesome as like a board wipe.
Yeah, it's been so good for me, and like even like in the matchups where like you wouldn't think it would be good, and like it hits everything you want it to hit besides planeswalkers, and it's so huge. Like against a Eldrazi Tron deck, or like it was like the Eldrazi like more of the aggro deck,
Mm-hmm.
just being able to have that early wrath against them was so huge. Like I was able to um like turn so like on my turn two, I recognized I need to like my turn one, I galvanic discharged them. So I got 3 energy. I did 0 damage to their spell. On my turn two, which was their or my turn three, I guess, because it was their turn three. They played like three. They had 2 3 drops out or something ridiculous out. They had a lot more pressure than I need them to have, and just being able to wipe the board for X3 because I saw like just early on like I need energy. Like my Wrath of Skies needs to be able to do 3 or 4 on the turn I'm casting it, and obviously I'm not going to have 6 mana to do that or 5 mana to do that on turn two, turn three. Was just a huge like upside that swung the game massively in my favor. Being able to set that early board wipe that just hit everything.
Oh yeah, just the energy package, which is brand new from Modern Horizons 3, has proven to be very good. I think energy was super busted when it was kind of first released. It was like one of the best things to be doing in standard at the time, by a lot. And I think
Oh
this
yeah.
time around, energy, I mean, is still like really good, but all the cards feel good, but not like oppressive.
No, so I mean, I think Wrathless Skies is the closest thing we have to oppressive, or like Wrathless Skies and Galvanic discharge feel oppressive in the sense of like they are very good for what they do for the mana it's costing,
Oh
right?
yeah,
But it's also like if Wrathless Skies has none of the if we don't have like Tune and Narrative and Galvanic Discharge, Wrathless Skies would just not see play.
yeah.
Like you need that cheap energy producing that you can play in this deck. Like I can't cast an artifact that like adds 3 mana or adds
Mm.
3 energy. Like that's just terrible. I can do this like little interactive stuff, and I think that's what makes Wrath the Skies so good. Because like when you get to Wrath the Skies and pay all the energy, card is terrible in technicality. Like
Yeah.
it's awful to see, but sometimes you just have to do that as a control deck. But it's amazing when you're able to do it on turn two, turn three, where you're just able to hit all these little creatures immediately. And it's like, I slowed them down. They don't have a board state now. We can play a couple more turns, which allows me, to get to my flames or gets to my one ring and start pulling ahead in the game.
Speaking of Flage too, I think this is kind of like the win condition that sort of kind of control decks were looking for, is just like a card that interacts with the board. It's going to lightning helix something. That little bit of life gain plus getting some of that pressure off the board is going to help you a lot to kind of survive, a few extra turns or even just an extra turn to get to like a good Wrath the Skies turn. But also the fact that later in the game, like this is going to come back and it is going to firmly shut the door on your opponent. They're going to be trying to claw through it, and you're just going to kind of, reverse battering ram it right on their fingers, and like they're just going to lose them, and you're going to win the game.
Yeah, Flaze has closed out so many games for me, and it's so good in the control deck because there's this whole thing of like back and forth resource. Sorry, and I played Flays early on like turn 3 through 5 or 6, and then now we're in turn 9. I was like, man, I need a way to like I have semi control of the board. We're at least parity, and it's like, well, I need something to like help close this out, and it's like, let me just escape my Titan and win.
Oh yeah, just the fact that this card gets to pull double duty, and where we see a lot of like control decks and mid range decks kind of get their bread and butter is that they have like these cards that pull double duty, and Flage does it very well. Again, just being able to Lightning Helix something for 3 mana, and the card's just going to sit in your graveyard till you need it. And once it actually comes into play and it gets to stick around, if you get in just 1 or 2 attacks with it, I mean, like, that's all she wrote, folks. Like, getting 6 to 9 life, and then if your opponent's not dead, they are very far off from killing you, which means that you have plenty enough time to just go get another Flage and then burn your opponent out, kind of from that spot. Just it's a great card. Like, Flage has been amazing so far, and I think was kind of underrated when it was spoiled. And as we've kind of found out about some cards that were underrated during like preview season and everything, turns out that they end up being like pretty good, and Flage has exceeded a lot of expectations, I think.
Yeah, Flaze definitely was on my radar as I saw this card. I was like, well, it doesn't seem bad. Like, I didn't think this card was a bad card, but I was like, I don't know what deck wants this, right? Because like the first thought that went to my mind was like the 4-color like Omnath deck might want it. I was like, well, they can play it as like a 1 of, maybe a 2 of at max. Like it's something else for them to do. And it's like, oh cool, that deck definitely needed more spells and things. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And but like, so Jeskai didn't exist as a deck before MH3. Like, Jeskai obviously exists as a deck. Like, you can play these colors and not get laughed at out of a tournament, but like, you're just playing blue-white control because there's no reason to add red. Red didn't do anything for you. Like, you can play Bolt, you can play some of the other like removal spells, but they weren't like good. Like, no one wanted to be casting Lightning Helix in their control deck. No one's like, oh man, Lightning Helix, sign me up. That's where I want to be.
2017
And
era worth of, like, 2017 era Jeskai control.
yeah, basically. So like, yeah, no one wanted to play red because it didn't add anything. Like, you weren't getting anything that blue white could already do, or like blue white was like basically 5 colors essentially with ley lines and splashing a couple different lands. Like, so like red didn't add anything that you couldn't already do in this blue white control. So why would I play red? And so when I first saw Flade, I was like, well, this doesn't have anywhere it goes. Like, nobody's like clamoring for this Titan. It's not a bad card, but there's nothing that's like wants this. And like, there's no deck that's been like hovering around tier 2, tier 2.5 status and sees Flage and go, I'm going to be viable now. This is what I was missing. Like, there was nothing really in the format that was like, oh, this is my golden card. Thank you, MH3. And then it turns out you just need to put in a couple good energy cards and make Galvanic Discharge, and Jeskai is like the best control deck to play now.
Looking at this list in particular that I flashed up on the screen here in the beginning, there's a lot of cards from Modern Horizons 3 that are in this deck, between like Invert Polarity, Wrath the Skies, Tune the Narrative. You have the Cosigna Memory in the sideboard. You have another, Flage and Wrath the Skies, Galvanic Discharge. Like, this deck benefited a lot from Modern Horizons 3, and I think in a post-Nadu world, if we ever get to that point, this deck is still pretty much set. Like, this deck is good with Nadu being in the format, and it's probably still pretty good like without it in the format. I mean, I don't think it really changes much of anything else that it's kind of doing, maybe except for like the dress down and stuff, but definitely benefited a lot from MH3.
Agreed. I think Dress Down even might not be terrible moving in or moving further in to a post Nadu world. It might just go to a sideboard type slot again. But I do think Dress Down's still a good card to have in the format, or not in the format, but in the deck as a whole.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like, this deck definitely, it doesn't exist without MH3. Like you said, it's playing close to almost 20 of its 60 or 20 of its 75 cards being MH3 cards.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, definitely one of the decks that benefited a lot from the set and everything. Aside from the Nadu decks, I think mainly being like MH3 cards, or a lot of them being MH3 cards.
Actually, I don't think they are as
That's
a whole. I think they're only like 9 or 10 cards are
Nadu, Springheart, and some other dumb stuff. I guess Sylvan Safekeeper too. All right, fair enough. I mean, I guess I got like the 2 best cards from Modern Horizons 3 in the deck.
Oh yeah, I mean, it got Nadu, it got Springheart. Like, it's definitely playing the eight copies of the 8 best, or 8 copies of the 2 best cards.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know how to say the best. I don't think Springheart's one of the best cards. I think it just does a lot for what it is, and was again overlooked as a whole.
Pairs the best with probably the best card from the set.
Yeah, but it's definitely playing the best card from the set that's going to get banned. But yeah, it did actually gain a whole lot as far. I mean, besides like the namesake card, Like it
Mm.
didn't gain a whole lot from MH3 comparatively when you look at what the Jeskai deck is doing, where it's playing 20 cards from MH3 or 20 copies from MH3 compared to just 8 or 9. Sorry.
Oh yeah.
But I do think that Jeskai is going to be here, stick around. I am curious to see if Flage is essentially enough to make this deck overtake Blue Eye Control permanently. Because I could see, I mean, we've already seen some iterations of Jeskai being not energy build, and I think that's wrong as it stands right now, especially with Wrath of Skies just being so good. I think that you want to be on the energy package, and like I think it's wrong to change it up because the Jeskai lists are kind of going to like the blue white style where they were playing Leyline Binding as
Mm.
one of their premium removal spells instead of like the Galvanic Discharge and such like that, which I think I get why it's played. I think it's wrong. That doesn't mean that I'm right, obviously, or somebody else is right or wrong. But I think that the energy package is good and here to stay as it sits.
Yeah, I think too good to like just not play the energy package at this point, or at least, if I'm going to pick up a control deck tomorrow, it's gonna take a lot to convince me to not play, the one of the best rats in the format, along with probably the best removal spell and like a cantrip that just kind of facilitates those other two cards.
Exactly. And I think with talking about the energy package, we should probably go ahead and talk about the best deck for energy.
Oh
I'm gonna
yeah.
say, or like the deck that makes the most use out of energy that isn't just a board wipe.
True, and I kind of, even though I had some sort of control over some of these deck lists, I wish that I had picked out the version splashing black because it's probably playing my other favorite black card from Modern Horizons 3, the Chthonian Nightmare.
Oh yeah, yeah. I I just looked up Boros Hacker list just so
Well,
you're aware.
yeah, I mean, that's what I was talking about was like the Boros
Yeah,
deck, but I was like, man, like the black version's pretty sweet, but I think the Boros version's definitely the more consistent performer.
I think it's a more consistent performer, but I do think that Mardu is going to overtake it because the Digi Nightmare card is just very powerful.
Oh man, I tell you what, I don't know whose idea it was to put so many of these like throwback or like callback cards in the set, but when you essentially make recurring nightmare and necropotence and you try to like fix them, it turns out that these two cards are definitely not fixed. Arguably, I don't know if they're necessarily better. I don't think they can be better, but they're pretty damn close.
I think Nightmare is a good fixed version, honestly.
It is, but like it's still just it's so disgusting. Like especially with all the other cards from Modern Horizons 3 that we can talk about here in a second that just make it even more disgusting that it's a card that they thought was a good idea to put in the set. Not that it's like broken by any stretch, but it just gives you so much value. It's tasty.
Honestly, I love the card personally. I love it, but like it's definitely it's I think it's right there on the edge. Like we are so close to where like if it gave you 4 energy or anything like more crazy like that, broken needs to be banned. But like the 3 energy, like it all kind of fits perfectly to where it's just like it's that razor thin edge though. You're just like, man, if this card had like one line of text different or did something slightly different, it definitely is just like ban
Yeah.
immediately. And it's something I love to see because it happens very, very infrequently to where you have this card that is right on the razor edge of like being just too powerful, but also just good enough to where like just weak enough to where it doesn't break something. And I think that's where that card is right on, where it's right on the razor's edge.
Oh yeah. I could also I'm also definitely wrong about like Just Cat Control getting the most from MH3 because it seems
Well,
like
yes,
this
I would
deck
more.
this deck has an insane amount of, I mean like let me tell you like I guess all the creatures are from Modern Horizon sets with Ragavan being
Yeah,
the only card not from MH3. So like a lot of the power in this deck is the fact that you can play like Gaia Souls on one and to like Amp Raptor on like turn 2 is like a really good play. So then you can essentially play any card that you hit in your deck because if you're
yeah.
such a low curve, and then like a Johnny Nikadal Pariah is it's a good card. Turns out creatures that turn into planeswalkers are very powerful cards, and this one is no exception in my book.
Yeah. So just so you know, it's playing seven cards from Modern Horizons 3 in its main deck, all as 4-0s.
Yeah, well, it's Guided Souls, Flage, Nakatl, Amp Raptor. I'm counting 4 on this.
Unstable Amulet, Static
And Static
Prison.
Prison, so it's like 6. There's like 6 or
Yep.
7 like 4-ofs in this deck for Modern Horizons 3.
Galvanic Discharge.
Galvanic Discharge, so like 7.
Yep. Yeah, it's
It's a
seven.
lot.
It's uh
28 cards for the kids counting at home.
yeah.
Yeah, like this is essentially kind of like a sort of like energy, like kind of value deck. I mean, it's getting to play some of the like really good red and white cards from Modern Horizons 3. Of course, it has Flage. Guide of Souls is like the super amped Soul Sister that gets you energy and life. And then on top of that, too, if you attack, you don't even have to attack with the Guide of Souls. You just have to attack with it, and then you can pay 3 energy, give something 2 +1/+1 counters, and a flying counter. If it's an angel, if that matters for like 5 cards that exist in Magic. But like, imagine just getting to attack with your Ragavan, and then now it's a 4/3 flyer. That's so it's even harder to block. It's harder to kill it in combat, and you also just get your value from it. Absolutely tasty.
Oh yeah. I'm a big fan of this deck. I do think this is kind of where we're seeing the mid-range aggro deck kind of end up being. Like I said, I think the Mardu version that has been floating around will eventually overtake this list, just because of Nightmare being able to buy back your stuff is so good, and being able to buy back Ajani's is kind of broken. Um, Not to mention, like, so as the control player among us, like with playing a lot of Jeskai control, Ajani's a pain in the ass to deal with. Just full stop. Like the fact that I have to make sure I kill a Johnny first, which is also the worst card to kill, is this annoying. Like knowing I have to kill the 1/2 that's not gonna like beat me down as fast as a 2/1 is already annoying. And then there's the other decks obviously running around with a Johnny that play way more cats too, which is also just a problem. Like a Johnny is so much better than I gave him credit for. And even in like this shell that doesn't take advantage of like the cat clause with him, just as like super good by itself too. But like I definitely read a Johnny when it was spoiled. It was like one of the first cards spoiled, and I remember reading him going,
Eh.
like I definitely like, I don't know if there's any deck that wants to waste 2 mana to get essentially a 2/1 cat, then and either removal spell out of the opponent's hand. And I was like, and then like I remember seeing him flipped. I was like, all right, no one's playing cat tribal, so the +2 on each cat you control doesn't matter. I was like, the 2/1, like the 0 ability seems good. The -4 ability is not relevant because it hit lands. I was like, all right. I mean, I guess if you flip it, it's good, but like that sounds like a lot of setup for not powerful enough. And then I played against it. I'm like, I fucking hate this card. Why was this printed? Stop.
Oh yeah, when you get to, I believe, I can't remember what player it was. I think it might have been like Ken Yukihiro or something. It was one of the Japanese players that did very well with a Mardu energy deck, and essentially got to a point where they like sacrificed a cat to like flip the first Ajani, and then just started looping Ajanis with the Chthonian Nightmare to just keep making 2/1s, and then like keep getting Planeswalker activations.
Gross.
It's like, oh my god. So just like bring it back, kill one, it's gonna flip the other one, and then I can go ahead and bring it back. And it's just so gross. Like just to keep going and like I'm gonna make another cat, I'm gonna deal a bunch of damage to you, make a cat, deal a bunch of damage, whatnot. Just so gross. Disgusting.
It is. And then so I have to give props to Aspiring Spike. He said that Amp Raptor was a broken and amazing card, and I thought he was laughable at best. And card is good. Card does a lot of good work, especially in this deck for sure. But this I've seen Amp Raptor played in a lot of different decks that weren't like heavily in on the energy package, and it still was very strong.
Turns out
Like
getting to get a free card off of something is pretty good.
yeah, I mean, it's like the worst case for this card, like relatively, like on an empty board state, is that you go Amp Raptor into like a Lightning Bolt or into Static Prison is like the absolute worst thing you can do with this card
Mm-hmm.
on like an empty board, and that still is like not terrible, right? Like Static Prison's your only terrible hit in this and with this card, and that's like saying you go like your opponent goes turn 1 tap land, you go turn 2 Amp Raptor and flip over Static Prison. Like that's your worst absolute hit. and like that's still just like adding one energy.
True.
Like
And
it just
yeah, yeah.
to make the next raptor better. Like, but that's like your worst possible hit here, and 90% of the time you're not hitting that worst possible hit.
Oh yeah. I would also argue too that Fable the Mirror Breaker is pretty bad if you do not gain any energy prior to casting the Raptor.
Yes, yes,
Feels bad,
that
man.
is. Well, I mean that's why you just go turn one Sacred Foundry into turn two Aether Hub, Amp Raptor, have three energy, hit Fable every time.
Oh yeah, that's some.
Have you not bought into the premium MTGO account yet?
No, because I still flood and get screwed at the worst possible times.
Oh yeah, you gotta pay for the extra.
Got to pay the one.
That being said, too, Static Prison is way better of a card than I honestly thought it was.
Oh yeah,
The fact that it's a one mana, just exile target non-land permanent an opponent controls is kind of broken. Like, yes, you get two energy, you have to pay an energy on your upkeep, but like, it doesn't matter if you're just removing a very prominent threat for one turn and like now putting them on the back foot. Like, it being able just to essentially exile anything you want for one mana is borderline broken.
yeah. Just a catch all to everything for like basically either until you can't pay for it anymore or until it doesn't matter and you're okay with it like leaving. You also get your draw step as well because it's the beginning of your pre-combat main phase instead of your upkeep. So you do get like that just that additional bit of information before you pay for it. Like if you draw another one, you could say, all right, I'm fine with getting rid of this. I'll sacrifice it, and then boom, you play another one, get two more energy, and then that one can stick around a lot longer until your opponent's able to answer it.
Yeah, it is a card I kind of I read it I read it and I was like, well, I don't think this card's like that great in the beginning because like I definitely thought you had to pay like an energy in the beginning of it. Like I skimmed over it. It was uncommon. A lot of the like commons and uncommons I skim over a lot because they're just like unless they're amazing, they don't really stick out to me, which is definitely a problem of mine. But like I look at rares, mythics, like things like that, things that look broken to begin with, or things that are going to be powerful theoretically because of the rarity. So I didn't take too close of a look at this. I also was kind of hesitant on a lot of the energy stuff in the beginning because like Wizards did energy too powerful when they put it in standard. And so I figured this time energy would be too weak. It's like, oh, we're gonna go back to energy. It's gonna be good. We've figured out how to do it correctly. It's like, yes, Wizards, you've said that about other spells before and the other abilities, and we've seen the ban list of multiple formats.
Mm-hmm.
So not gonna believe you too hard. So I assumed it was gonna be way too weak. So I kind of scanned over a lot of the energy stuff, just going, energy is not gonna be good. It's not gonna matter. And Stag Prison has definitely been way better than I ever expected it to be for one, and two, just kind of crazy.
Yeah, it just the efficiency of it, the fact that again you just get that extra little bit of information to where you can kind of make a more educated decision on like do I let it stick around, do I whatever with it. We've seen something like a like the Storm decks play this like in the sideboard as like a card that they can go get to answer an onboard thing, and then basically pass the turn, pay an energy to keep it around, then go off from there, or just even go off on that turn, whatever. By the way, that's also a deck that we're not looking at is the Storm deck because it's good, it's busted, but it just got absolutely destroyed in the Pro Tour, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. So just play around the sideboard hate, hope that they don't draw it.
What everyone forgot about Storm is that it's very easy to hate out because Wizards has specifically put a target on Storm over the last like 5-10 years where they constantly just like, hey man, you know how Storm was a deck sometimes? Like remember how it showed up in like that top 32 like 4 tournaments ago? Yeah, that player
Mm.
was really happy. Yeah, we made another anti-Storm card.
Yep.
But he barely got top. Yeah, we don't want him to even get top 32. No. That was too high. He needs to be top 64 at best. And then that happens, and they put another Storm card. Hey, because top 64 is too high for them. They should be 128 at best. And then another Storm card gets printed to stop them.
We have
Like,
a
there's so much hate right now for Storm decks that it's not funny. And, like, it turns out if everyone just, like, puts Storm hate in their sideboard, you can't beat the hate every single time.
Turns out we made a 0 mana artifact that says if your opponent would cast a spell that would produce mana, you get to take the card out of its sleeve and tear it up,
I mean, we're so close to that point right now.
and you counter it.
Wizards just hates Storm. Like they make cards for Storm and they're like, oh, why do we do that? We hate Storm, and then instantly make more hate cards for it. It's like,
For every one card the Storm deck gets, it's 10 to 15 cards that absolutely just waffle stomp it.
that can also be played in every color.
Yeah.
Like we made Dampening Spear. Why is it colorless? Fuck you. That's why. All right, thanks.
Speaking of decks that hate Damping Sphere,
Oh,
notice all these
thanks.
seamless transitions that are definitely are not planned out by any stretch of the imagination.
That one definitely wasn't playing out because I was like, where's he going? We're like, oh yeah.
The last deck that we have here, we're not gonna go over every single deck from the Pro Tour. These are just the ones that, like, at least when I was watching the event, I saw them and I thought these decks are just really good. They're just really good decks, even in a very homogenized metagame, seemingly towards a certain bird wizard. And these decks performed decent at the Pro Tour and will probably perform decent after. And this one was kind of one that a lot of content creators kind of played around with and ended up still being pretty good, turns out, because Tron always shows out for the Pro Tours, and that's Urza Tron, and this is definitely more of an Eldrazi Tron kind of build away from the more traditional Tron decks that we are used to seeing at some of the top tables of the Pro Tour.
Wait, are you telling me making 7 mana on turn 3 is still good?
It might be.
All right, hang on, I gotta write that one down.
Man, and the fact that
7 mana turn 3 still good. Okay.
I really
Okay.
like how in this deck, and I'm just kind of noticing this, that it basically plays a bunch of lands that on average tap for at least 2 mana, with one exception, a land tapping for 3. But it's playing 2 swamps in a deck that's playing Null Drifter. That's just kind
That's
of
great.
fun. That's fun.
Just for the Dismember. Just for the Dismember.
Yeah, I mean, I guess engineer explosives as well. I guess if you need to kill like a 1 mana thing, sure. Plus any of the other spheres and whatnot.
I also want to point out that, like, you know how Tron will sometimes play like the stars or lanterns, like the things that make colored mana.
Mm-hmm.
This man has chosen to play 2 Mind Stones to
Yeah,
just tap for a colorless.
tap for colorless mana, extra ramp to get into some of your which is kind of it's kind of funny in a way, because I know that you just want more mana for like Kozilek's Command and whatnot, but the fact that like Devourer of Destinies, which is like a new MH3 card and pairs well with the other MH3 card and Ugin's Labyrinth, that you're still playing like 7 costed cards like Null Drifter, new Modern
Yeah.
Horizons 3, 7 mana. You have Thought Knot Seer, 4 mana. Kozilek's Command, you can do X5 on turn 3, Karn Liberated, Karn the Great Creator, so on. All these cards were like having just it doesn't make any sense. Like Mindstone just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. I do want to talk about Devourer of Destiny. This card has definitely put I want to say Eldrazi, like I want to say like Eldrazi aggro as well back on the menu. Just like this, along with Ugin's Labyrinth, is being able to now have consecutively double, like, 4 mana on turn 2, and just being able to look at the top 4 cards of your library and put one of them on top, and then you exile the rest. Like, just this, being in your opening hand, and like it pairs well because it digs for Ugin's Labyrinth, and then it also pairs well because it's 7 mana for Ugin's Labyrinth. Like, it's everything you want in one card. Just like, hey man, I really need to dig for Ugin's Labyrinth, but I also need a 7 drop to put under Ugin's Labyrinth. That's like, say no more. I have you.
I guess come to think of it, there is like a line of play where you like do the Destiny thing, you go get an Ugin's Labyrinth, and then you turn you turn 1 Mindstone, because then it allows you to turn 2 Thought Knot Seer.
Yeah.
So I am stupid on that part. I should have realized that in this Tron deck that I didn't respect its game like that.
You don't have to respect Tron. Just hope the aggro decks take it out.
Yeah, I mean, man, how like every time, like I think I've said it in a video before, maybe even on the podcast, where Tron, like if you look at it in an RCQ, you take it to a 1K, 5K, whatever the stakes are, like if it's not being played at the Pro Tour, it's just like a mid. It's mid. It's a mid deck. It goes to the Pro Tour. Aside from like this one, it just ends up looking like one of the best things you could be doing in the format. And I just don't understand how the best players in the world come to that conclusion. And it's a deck that I think is pretty easy to play, all things considered, compared to what you could be playing. And people at locals can't win with it, but like the pros at the biggest stage against other pro players can absolutely dominate games with it. It's crazy.
I will say, even at the Pro Tour, there was a Eldrazi Breach deck that got 24 points. Um, so it still was like in top 16, top 32, and essentially a deck like essentially in a meta that like was combo centric and like trying to go do better things. Like this deck still was just like, yeah, man, I'm still gonna try on. I'm still gonna do dumb shit. Watch me.
Oh yeah, this is
Like it's just every time this just turns out that like, yeah, man, having a lot of mana is good.
yeah. It's
And it
definitely
kills
not
me.
short. It's definitely not short on how much mana it can produce, and as I said, between like Eldrazi Temple, Ugin's Labyrinth for those Eldrazi spells, it's gonna produce 2 mana like on turn one, and then from there, you have your Mine Tower and Power Plant that when they're all assembled can produce 2 mana and then 3 mana for the tower. Just so much consistency in this deck to where you can either go on the Tron plan or you can go just on the Eldrazi like Soul Land plan, and you're not really in bad shape either way.
Yeah. That being said, I think that after Nadu gets banned, I'm interested to see what the Eldrazi aggro deck that's been running around will do. The deck doesn't feel bad. I've played against it a couple times. I haven't played it myself, but I've watched a lot of people play it, as well as seen gameplay of it and stuff like that. And it looks really good. And like it looks like it has game against pretty much everything that's running around, not counting Nadu. Like Nadu feels like a god awful matchup for that deck. But outside of that combo deck, like it feels good against a lot of the rest of the format. And it applies a quick enough pressure against the mono black aggro deck that like when they're finally able to draw their cards on, turn three, they're already sitting at like 10 less lives. Like, all right, man, you want to draw 9 cards, I hope you hit it.
Oh yeah.
Like, I hope you hit, because if you don't, you're dead.
It's also some of the other like breach decks that I've seen that are the Eldrazi like breach decks. Like I think Jim Davis was like one that between like everybody on his testing team, which is basically like every great pro player from like the last like 10 plus years. He was the only person that picked that deck, and I think went 6-4 in modern.
Respectable still. I mean, like, you're still playing against the best players of the world. Like, it's hard to sit there and go, like, you had a winning record in modern and in a format that was known to have a very successful combo deck, and, like, you still went 6-4. Like, it's hard to sit there and go, well, obviously you're dumb, Jim. Like, why didn't you play a better deck?
Oh yeah, I mean when Nadu was like the legal deck of the Pro Tour, like I think anything other than Nadu was technically a bad decision. But when you have a winning record, again against some of the best players in the world, really hard to say that you made necessarily a bad decision.
Exactly. I will also say, too, that um, anybody who didn't take Nadu obviously thought that they had a game plan against Nadu that was going to work. It wasn't like everyone knew Nadu was coming, right? So like everybody who didn't take Nadu had a game plan or thought that they could beat Nadu. It wasn't like there's like, oh, deck doesn't. I didn't know deck existed. I would have taken that instead. Like everyone had a game plan for that deck. Now, obviously, it was wrong, and we've kind of proven that it was wrong when Nadu was the talk of the tournament, taking down 5 of the top 8 spots, like was it 9 or 10 of the top 16 spots, and some ridiculous number of the top 32 spots. Clearly, like Nadu was the correct choice by large and by far. So like
Yeah.
obviously, it was a wrong choice. But everyone who didn't take Nadu definitely thought they had a game plan for the deck. They weren't just like Nadu wasn't this unknown deck that no one saw coming everyone knew this deck existed from about 10 minutes after Doomwake spoiled the card.
Oh yeah.
So this was not something that was unknown. This was not something that was like just took everyone by storm or by craze. Like it was 20 something. What, it was 25% of the meta of the day
Yeah,
one.
between the four color and the Bant version, it was 25% of the meta.
So like deck obviously well known. People knew it was coming. People knew what was happening. It wasn't unknown. So people had a game plan for it. It just turns out that sideboard plans don't matter when the deck's still stacked good.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh boy, that unfortunately brings us to the unfun part of the night, which is of course, we talked about all these cool decks. We talked about how sweet the mono black necro deck is, the essentially like blue white, or not blue white, the like red white X like energy decks are. And yes, I'm throwing Jeskai in there as an energy deck, and some of the Eldrazi decks and a little bit of the other variants and stuff of the format. But unfortunately, Bant Nadu is the one that absolutely just blew up any plans of like a sweet looking metagame.
Yeah, when we look back at this Pro Tour, it's definitely going to be the Nadu Pro Tour. I mean, this is the same way as like we had the Eldrazi Winter Pro Tour and we had um the Hogak Pro Tour, right? It's just this deck was the talk of the Pro Tour, and it's done better. I mean, it did better than you said Hogak did, right? Like it was, and like people were claiming for Hogak to be banned immediately, and it had a better percentage showing up and of like conversion,
Oh yeah.
and people are still like, I don't know, man, the meta's gonna figure it out. I'm like, probably not, and that's kind of why I hammered so much. Like anyone who didn't take Nadu had a game plan for it, and it still did ridiculously well. Like that's, I don't think the meta is going to adapt. Like there's no adapting to when you have pro players who like, hey man, this is probably gonna be tier, like this is gonna be the number one deck or the second deck that is played, right? Because everyone thought either Ruby Storm or Nadi was gonna be either the top or like their first and second. So like no one was surprised that Ruby Storm was there and no one was surprised Nadi was there. Everyone had a game plan against those two decks, and it didn't matter when it came to Nadu. People had 4 or 5 sideboard cards for Nadu, and it was still breaking the tables.
Oh yeah. So to give some like stats and stuff like that to kind of put it into perspective, because for some of the people that may not know about like Hogak, Eldrazi Winter, whatever, I'm not sure about Eldrazi Winter because to be fair, for that format, from what I understand, the Eldrazi deck really wasn't like a known thing going into it. It was kind of like a surprise of the tournament. I think someone said it was like 6% of the meta at that Pro Tour. Still dominated, like, and then
Yeah,
it's named Eldrazi Winter for a reason. So if that gives you a hint of what happened, 6 copies of like Eldrazi decks in like the top 8 of that tournament, where Nadu put 5 copies in its top 8. Nadu had a 59% win rate against the field, and the only deck that had a pretty good matchup against the Nadu deck, and the only technical good matchup as far as percentages, was the 4 color Nadu deck, which had like a 54-55% win rate against the deck. A 59.3% win rate at the Pro Tour for Bant Nadu specifically was more than Hogak and Scam in their respective Pro Tour, and I believe just having a 25% like clip of like the meta is definitely more than Scam. And then I think Hogak might have been more just because there was the 2 different variants of the deck in the tournament. But either way, like a quarter of the metagame, everybody knew about it. Everybody knew about Hogak and Scam going into those Pro Tours, and those decks had like just above a 50% win rate, while Nadu had almost a 60% win rate in a room full of the best players in the world.
that had a sideboard plan for it.
Yep. And the fact that the worst thing that probably happened to this Nadu deck in the whole tournament was the fact that it wasn't the 1 seed. It just took the second, third, fourth, sixth, and eighth spots in the top 8,
Exactly.
and then only lost to itself in the top 8.
Yeah, yeah. We had the one mirror match in the top 8, and then top 4 was all Nadu decks. So little unreal when it comes to the fact that like Nadu essentially just took the tournament and ran with it, and it wasn't close.
Oh yeah.
And it's why I'm a big fan of banning the deck. I know when it first came out, I was like, I don't know how good this deck is. Obviously, I wasn't playtesting it. I wasn't gonna buy the 1 mana artifact
Shuko.
when it was like
Yeah.
I wasn't buying Shukos for $30 fucking piece. I was like, I'm just gonna wait and see if this deck is good. If it's really good, then I'll look at like maybe trying to invest in it. If it's not really good, then I'm just gonna have a game plan to beat it, and I'll just see what the Pro Tour kind of has to say, right? Like I'm gonna wait and see it out because I didn't think the deck was at the level it was at. I thought it was a good deck. I've seen it get played. I'm like, all right, yeah, it's a good deck. That, okay. I also saw Ruby Storm be a good deck and got a couple 5-0s with that in the league, and then also got 0-4s because I can't beat sideboard hate.
Yeah.
So like,
Yeah.
I was like, I'm gonna wait and see. We have pros who are playtesting against this deck. I'm sure there's some sideboard cards I'm just not thinking of. I'm also not like actively caring because I'm not in the pro tour. I don't have to give a shit.
Yeah.
And then I
Yeah.
saw the Pro Tour, and I was like, "Oh, this is an amazing deck, and it's miserable to play against, and it's miserable to play. Even it looks like no one looks like they're having fun comboing off." I was like, "Yeah, so this deck is looks certified broken." And then I watched day two and the top eight. I'm like, "Oh, this deck is just broken. Awesome!" So I was like, "Cool." But like, I think a lot of people had the same skepticism coming in. Is like, was Nadu real? Is Nadu really this good? Because everyone knew it was a good deck, and outside of the people who were actually playtesting it and playing it, no one really knew if it was broken or not, right?
Yeah.
And then obviously a bunch of pros and good people and people who got to the pro tour and your uncle Carol who got there like figured out that Naughty was a good deck. There's a reason why it was 25% of the meta between Bant and Four Color, and then we saw it just run the tables while laughing at sideboard hate.
Yeah. That's essentially how how it went. I think during the testing process too, there was a bunch of pro players that I think I can't remember what player it was. I think it might have even been like Sam Party who was trying to find every reason to not play the Nadu deck, and then with all the testing and everything they did in their house, just decided that like basically said fuck it, I'm playing this deck, and took it to the finals of the Pro Tour.
Yeah,
I mean, just decided on a whim like I'm going to play this deck because no one has now. I've basically been convinced that like I did not want to play this deck. I had my mind set on not playing it, and then after playing against it and whatnot, decided to play it.
yeah. I mean, I think that if you're even going into it and you're like, I don't want to play Nadu, it doesn't look fun, it doesn't look like my style deck, it doesn't look like intro, whatever reason is that you don't want to play Nadu. And you sit down and test and test and test and like, all right, well, what about these sideboard cards? What about this card? What about this card? And you're constantly just like getting stomped by Nadu. You learn that like Nadu is just the choice to take, right? Like that's the deck you need to take.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what a lot of people came on to the conclusion. Like Sam Pardee came to the conclusion of like, I don't want to play this deck. I think this deck is like horrendous to play, or I don't like it, or I blue isn't my favorite color. Whatever was his reasoning, he's just like, I don't want to play it, and then basically was forced into playing it because it's so powerful and so good.
Oh yeah, and the fact too, like the evolution of the deck. So players were playing like Thassa's Oracle. That was like the way to win the game, and for some corner cases, like it just didn't work out that way. So they found a better way of winning the game was finding a convoluted way to loop Beseiju and Otawara and a bunch of lands to then make a ton of mana, continue to go through your deck, and then just blow up all your opponent's non-basic lands, bounce all of their like relevant non-land permanents, and pass the turn with a board full of endurances and 1/1 insects, and basically nobody can beat that board. No deck is able to beat that board.
Yeah,
So like, and the fact too that you really can't theoretically do this online. It just takes a lot of clicks and a lot of things to do it. So some of the decks are playing Thassa's Oracle online, even though I watched Menguchi not play Thassa's Oracle in his deck and just said, I'm going to make a bunch of 1/1s and my opponent just has to have it while I loop through and do my thing. And they never had it. Still 5-0 the league. Played horrendous, all things considered, throughout that league and still managed to trophy it.
yeah. The deck is just very good, and we're in this weird waiting period, right, where it's gonna get banned. Everyone thinks it's gonna get banned. There's some idiots out there who says that the meta will adapt. They're wrong. and like Wizards just need to come out and say it needs to be banned. Like Wizards needs to come out probably like realistically Monday and just ban the deck. We're getting ready to go in. We're at the end of the Pioneer RCQ season. We're getting ready to go into the modern RCQ, and people need to know this deck is going to get banned, so we don't have people wasting money, time, and effort to try to build this deck that's just going to get banned. And I also think that Wizards is horrendously dumb and doesn't do anything until mid-August when the official bannings are. Like
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna ruin the RCQ season. You're gonna have people who don't want to go. Like I know there's multiple people who don't want to go play in RCQs if Nadu is gonna be legal because they don't want to play the mirror match because it's horrendous. They don't want to play against the deck because it doesn't like there's not a good game plan against it. Um, like why would I want to go spend, you know, 20, 30, $40 at an RCQ to go 0-3 because I didn't play Nadu, or go 0-3 because I did play Nadu and my opponents had the kill condition faster.
Oh yeah.
Like I'm not gonna sit here and spend money on RCQs or go to RCQ tournaments and deal with Nadus. Like that's like I will just sit out the RCQ season. I've already like that's where I'm at already because I know that's what it's gonna be and it's not worth my time and effort to do that.
Oh yeah. There's definitely going to be a cost to playing this deck. If they're gonna stay true to like August being like they're banning, there is a little bit of time that you have to kind of like play the deck, learn ins and outs, stuff like that. Even getting to play it now while it's not the RCQ season. And by far, it is the best deck in the format. You're playing Nadu or you're doing something else, and I think that something else is probably more fun than Nadu, but it's definitely not better than what Nadu is doing. Even if it drops like a 57% win rate, like that's still ridiculously high in a game with as much built-in variance as Magic. So definitely, if you have the majority of this deck built, I would say that sure, if you're willing to like potentially lose a few $100s, then sure, go ahead, build it, play it for like the potentially 2 weeks that it's legal for in the RCQ, get your invite and call her a day. But if you're like thinking about building it, don't don't waste the money.
Yeah, don't like if you want to buy the land base, that's fine. Like the lands aren't gonna get worse. Like Urza Saga is not gonna become a $10 card when Nadu gets banned.
Mm.
Like, the land base isn't gonna go down. Most of the creatures besides Nadu aren't a terrible investment as a whole for Nadu. Let me double check before I say that. Um, like I wouldn't buy Michelin Bills. They're a commander card unless you're gonna play them commander. It's not good. But like yeah, the rest of these cards are like not worth a whole lot of money. And like Springheart's still gonna be a good card after this after Nadu gets banned. Like land base is fine to buy into. The one rings if you don't have them, I'm sorry. Don't buy don't buy Shukos. Like we've already seen them price drop after the Pro Tour because people knew they were going to get banned. I would be very surprised if any shops or any like buddy is honestly trying to pick those up either because like everyone knows that this deck has a hit list on its head, and it's just a matter of when does Wizards pull the trigger. Like we saw Shukos go up. They were like pushing I think 40 $50 at one point in time, and after the Pro Tour they dropped down to 30. Like or they're below 30 right now. They're at like 27, 25.
Oh yeah.
They like if a deck wins the Pro Tour and then cards start dropping in price from that deck, it's not because the deck isn't good enough. It's because people know it has a hit on its head.
Oh
It
yeah.
has a target on its head. It's going to get hit, and that's where we're at. Like it's just not a deck that anyone should be trying to get into or buy into. Essentially, like obviously, you know, if you own all the like if for some reason you own Sukos already because you played back in that block and kept all your cards, great. Like sure, I guess build into the deck if you really want to, but like yeah, it's not a good investment money wise outside of the land base because none of those lands are going to drop in value.
Oh yeah.
I
And
guess I'd like to get that. Dried Arbor might drop in value, realistically.
it was I think it was already like a relatively cheap card, wasn't it? It's like a few bucks.
Yeah, it went up in price because people were picking them up. So I mean,
That's
but like,
fair.
but yeah, like it's just this deck has a target on its head. Anyone who thinks that it doesn't is either lying to themselves or trying to cope harder. Um, you know, and like it's just yeah, it's a great deck. It's definitely a ban-worthy deck based off of what we've seen. What multiple pro players who played the deck in the pro tour, who had did well with it, who had won with it, who got top whatever, have said that this deck needs to get banned. Frank Carson, the guy who is all about numbers and thinking that the meta can adjust and needs to adjust, has come out and wrote a whole article saying it needs to get banned. Like the data is there, and so is the people who play the game at the highest level are saying this. It's clearly not because the deck just spiked a tournament. Like,
Oh yeah, it's definitely, I think, caught in the perfect storm where, sure, you can play more hate for a deck, but at like what point are you playing like so much hate main board, so much sideboard that it becomes like too much? And we kind of go back to Hogak being kind of the more recent standard of these kind of like tier zero formats, where the best thing to do if you were playing Hogak and you wanted to beat Hogak was also play Hogak, but you were playing Leyline of the Void in your main deck. And that was essentially what the format revolved around. And basically at that Pro Tour, you saw both versions kind of cannibalize themselves completely out of like top eight contention, minus like one player making the top eight and running pretty cold in their quarterfinal match. But either way, like that was like the meta adjusting, was like, hey, the only way to beat Hogak is to play a main deck, 4 copies main deck of a card that has always been in the sideboard forever. Rarely ever saw a main deck play unless there was a super dominant graveyard deck. And guess what? We had a super dominant graveyard deck, and that was like the only way that players could come up with to beat it.
yeah, and not to mention even just on top of like that, like it's just one of these things where like even if like Hope or not Hogak, but like Nadu cannibalizes itself to some degree, is that like where you want to be at? Like, do you want to be like we're main decking 4 Forces of Despairs in our main deck that's terrible against every other deck in the format, but it's good against Nadu, so we have to play it. Like, that's not healthy. That's not a healthy meta. And like if you take away Nadu, because like if you go play in a like an MG a league on Moto right now, not a lot of people are playing Nadu, especially in the leagues, because it's no one like they don't want to practice on with a deck that is going to get hit. There's no reason to. And if you play in the leagues, it's fun. You have a diverse meta right now, a bunch of different decks, people doing a bunch of different things, people doing sweet things, people doing strong things that aren't broken though. Like nothing feels like this needs to be banned.
Mm.
And I think like that meta looks healthy and happy. But the meta we have now, where if you would go to like a 5K tomorrow, and like people were actually like still building Nadu, like you didn't have a target on his head, you would be miserable. You would play against a lot of Nadu decks, and you wouldn't be having fun because you can't even scoop to Nadu technically because it doesn't have a deterministic kill.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have to kind of sit there and just watch your opponent play Magic. At least with Storm, when it goes off, like maybe it takes 2 minutes, but like you're dead. Like you can scoop halfway through them going off almost, and like yeah, man, you got it. Like you got 16 mana, and Raul's gonna activate here at some point. I'm not winning. I got it. Let's go to game 2. Like you have to sit there and watch Nadu play a game that you may still win.
Oh yeah.
And like that's horrific because also like it's gonna take you time. It's complicated. It makes games go to time, or it makes matches go to time. No one likes that. Like from a logistical standpoint, this deck is horrible. From a player standpoint, this deck is horrible. From a power level, it's overpowered. Like it checks all the boxes for why it should get banned, and we still have people sitting here arguing that like, no man, the meta will adjust. The Pro Tour doesn't mean anything. No man, the best people, the best players in the world all went to the Pro Tour knowing Nadu was the best deck, had a sideboard plan for the deck, still got their asses kicked, and you have the guy who does all the analytical data, Frank Carson, sitting here going, the deck needs to be banned. And yet somehow people are like, the meta will adjust. To what? Nadu versus Nadu with main deck sideboard hate?
Yep.
Awesome. I look forward to Hogak 2.0.
Yeah, I think people have a hard time understanding. I mean, especially too, I think maybe people are under the assumption that there wasn't enough hate necessarily being played for it, and it's just it's always kind of the play removal, play more hate or whatever, and then like the best deck can't be that good. And I think to a point you're right, but when your whole sideboard, and maybe I'm being hyperbolic, but if your whole sideboard ends up becoming dedicated to it, and then your main deck choices also become dedicated to it, it ends up making for a worse metagame altogether, because then you have other decks that kind of get to run wild. Like basically when you have a deck's trying to like overcorrect for something, and then like another deck gets to kind of like take over, or at least starts to do well, and you kind of just have this wild meta game where it's just easier to ban the most broken thing that only really loses, quite literally loses to itself with some regularity, whether it's playing in the mirror or just whiffing some amount of the time, that you just need to take some kind of action. And I think that we made a mistake last time by banning like Bridge from Below instead of just banning Hogak. And we saw that Hogak was still one of the best things to do in the format. I think you just ban Nadu instead of banning something like Shuko, Outrider Encore, or any of the like tutor effects to go get Nadu. You rip the band-aid off and just be done with it.
Exactly. Like none of these cards are broken until Nadu came out, right?
Yeah.
And like, I'm really hoping Wizards doesn't do the dumb thing where like, oh, we're gonna ban Shuko because that's gonna stop the deck. It's like, all right, cool. Well, we already found out that there's two other at least good enablers in Mercifully Bill and Outrider and Encore that will just also win the game and are good with getting Summoner's Pact and Court of Calling. We can get we can get Mercifully Bill with both of those. We can get Outrider with just Court of Calling, and now we also get to make the mana base better because they're no longer have to play Urza Saga in their 3-color deck.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds like a great plan. And then like you can't like and then what are you like? What's the next step? Then we start banning Quarter Calling stuff. I mean, I'd be happy to ban Summoner's Pact. Like I would love to take Titan down a peg for sure. But like we can't just start banning more and more cards because we want Nadu to stay. Like, and then of course you have like the other argument I hear people like, well, they won't ban Nadu because it's driving sale prices for MH or for Modern Horizons 3. 100% not. If anything, Nadu being in the format is going to hurt sales prices because people aren't going to want to play Modern if they know they're going like the next 5K they're going to is going to be full of Nadu decks.
Oh yeah.
Like this is you're going to make a worse meta that's not going to want people to play. That's then not going to drive sales. Nadu is not driving sales. Nadu is like a $5 card. If I want to play set of Nadu, I'm going to go buy them off the TCG player, my local game store, some guy off the street. Like I can get Nadus for a cheap price without buying a $10 pack. Like that's not how economics works. So like Nadu's not driving anything. If anything, it's going to hurt your sales as a whole because you're going to destroy your metagame. And the whole reason why people are cracking packs. Like don't get me wrong, there's powerful cards for Commander and like kitchen play Magic in Modern Horizons 3, so people will still buy packs. That's not going to stop just because Nadu exists or doesn't exist. But like Nadu's not driving people to buy packs.
Yeah. The fact that at the end of the day, we have a pretty sweet metagame. I think outside of Nadu, sure, we can say that like Mono Black is then positioned to be one of the best decks in the format. We can say that, Storm ends up being better and blah, blah, blah. Whatever. We can say all those things. But I think at the end of the day, that if you're saying that like, well, Nadu should stick around because then if we get rid of Nadu, then there's another deck that ends up being really powerful. It's the question of like, do we think that then a deck that ends up rising up after Nadu gets banned is going to be on the same level as Nadu in terms of like dominance and things like that? And I don't think that that's the case. I mean, Mono Black, we can make the case that it will be a very good deck and could be like the best deck going forward in our metagame without Nadu. But, that remains to be seen. And you can say that it's like hypocritical of like, well, then let's see what happens when the metagame tries to adjust to Nadu. It's not going to adjust to Nadu. Mono Black is something that is already kind of hated out by a lot of the decks anyway, just because Boseiju is one of the most played cards like in the format anyway. It's just every green deck plays it. So like everyone has like a main deck hate for it that doesn't change effectively how you build your deck.
Well, here's I think the biggest thing too. So like, let's say Mono Black Necrodominus becomes the best deck in the format. Let's say it becomes it's gonna be tier 1, right? I think it's gonna be tier 1 if Nadu gets banned.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's already almost tier 1 without Nadu being in the format. If Nadu gets banned, Necrodominus comes tier 1, sure. The biggest difference though is So if I go to remove your Necrodominance, right? Like it's my turn two. I'm just gonna hold up mana because I know you're going turn three Necrodominance.
Mm-hmm.
That's the best thing you can do. So my turn two, I'm holding up mana to destroy Necrodominance. All I have to do is make sure you don't go to your end step to get any value from Necrodominance.
Yep.
Like the absolute best case scenario is you got an extra land from it because I besage you.
Yep.
That's like best case, like ultimate value you're getting.
Oh yeah.
If I have to kill Nadu because you're going to go for it, you get your first activation from the targeting of it. So like this is saying that you have Shuko to the artifact. So it's gonna be a sorcery, so I can interact with it. You're gonna get one trigger from that. You're gonna get the trigger from me killing your Nadu. So you've already 2-for-1 made. Without anything else going on. And if you just like flip over, you can flip over 2 lands that come into play untapped, which will give you more options for the rest of the turn. You can get you can just flip over more. You get to flip over. You're either drawing 2 cards or getting 2 lands of just pure value. They're either going directly into play or just you're drawing 2 cards. So I'm 2-for-1ing myself no matter what. And so we take 2-for-1ing compared to best case scenario you got a basic land. Really hard to argue that like Necrodominance is now like tier 0 because you're always 2-for-1ing yourself.
Yeah, I mean, the also obviously like Court of Calling makes the Nadu deck amazing because even the play that you're talking about, Randy, I think in Manguchi's league where he flipped over like a land, got a creature from the Springheart Nantuku, was able to court for one for a the Sylvan Safekeeper to then like protect Nadu from the removal spell, untap and then win the game.
Exactly. Like again, just amazing value you're getting for trying to interact with the deck. Like if I interact with Necrodominance, I can just stop them from getting any value. Like any value. Like I will give my opponent a land every time they cast Necrodominance if it means that like they never get any other value from it. I will gladly make that trade every day and twice on Sunday.
Oh yeah.
Because it doesn't matter. Like that is not value that I'm giving up. Like congratulations, you get to draw 20 cards this turn, but you got a land. Like deal. Oh no. Take it. Take it. Like, and that's saying I don't just like play any kind of enchantment removal or like a leyline binding or literally any other spell that could handle Necrodominance. That is just saying that the Seiju is the only card I'm using to handle Necrodominance.
Oh yeah.
Because that's the only thing that's going to give them a value from it. And if I just play any kind of like destroy, like exile target black spell or exile or black permanent or destroy target enchantment or exile enchantment, they get nothing. It's a clean 1-for-1 trade, and they built their deck around not doing 1-for-1 trades.
Yeah, again, like I think a lot of the difference that you can see from like the mono black decks versus like Nadu is also the fact that you have ways to assemble your combo at instant speed when you're playing Nadu. Like you're just able to do so many more like tricks, and I think mono black it's pretty face up. Like you can just assume that they probably have a Necrodominance that they're going to play. Sometimes they can play it on turn 2. Most of the time, it seems like they can play it like on turn 3 with some consistency, and of course, like use grief, scam stuff to like interact. Like it's doing something very powerful. It's just it feels a little bit more like straight up. We've seen the deck kind of also lose to itself, but by and large, like a lot of the common interactions and stuff that we see in the format, like with Leyline Binding, we see Thoughtseizes, we see Besagus, things like that. And of course, like control being a little bit more prevalent, I think is a little bit harder for the Necro decks to interact in a position where if they don't scam on turn 1 and they just try to like maybe go Thoughtseize into 2-mana spell, whatever the case may be, it gets a little bit harder for them. So I don't know. I'm not fully convinced like mono black becomes like necessarily the boogeyman in the format, but I do believe that it could be the best deck in a post Nadu format, and I think it is a lot better of a deck in the short term to be the best deck versus something like Nadu.
Agreed. I think that even if it like even saying like I said, even if it comes tier 1, it's so much easier to interact with as a whole. And even just from games that I've played against it, you can get a point to where like you can not lock them out, but like you force them into a worse play pattern than normal decks because they still like Necro Dominant still has a price tag on it in the sense of like you skip your draw step, so you end up hurting their life total enough to where they can't draw 40 cards. Like that's a real price to pay. You now only have your hand of 5 cards that you're trying to like gain life off of to be able to do something.
Oh yeah, like
You can
there's a
put them in
price.
awkward positions.
Yeah, this deck does not very easily get rid of Necrodominance, and just I don't know. It's hard to it's hard to imagine. It's kind of funny thinking because we've had the One Ring for so long, and like the One Ring, multiple copies of it, even though it's legendary, are fantastic, and multiple copies of Necrodominance are terrible because you still don't get out from underneath of it. And the fact that the deck that's playing it and abusing it does not have a way of getting out underneath of it, where if theoretically someone's like aggressive enough and it doesn't have the insane like scam draw, or I'm gonna have double soul spike plus quad black card or whatever into Necrodominance to end up drawing a bunch of cards and kind of setting back up, you can easily put it at a low enough life total where it can only draw 1 or 2 cards, and like that's it. And like if it's drawing 2 cards, like kind of who cares? I mean, like the One Ring's been drawing 4, 5, 6 cards, and then people getting out of paying the life for it for over a year now.
Exactly.
Like yeah, like mono black I think in positions like might struggle against like the control decks, you know uh short of like any scam start like we've seen from red black scam, mono black scam, Orzov, whatever, decks that don't have that insane start of like double Thoughtseize into keeping a 3/2 or a 4/3 body in the play on turn one, uh just kind of play like a fair-ish like mid-range deck. And I think that's overall fine. I think if anything, if you want something from Necro gone on top of something from Nadu, just get rid of Grief, and then you still have like the core of like the mono black Necro deck, and you eliminate like one of the best turn one plays in the format in the process.
Exactly. I think that we need to see the bird go, and we need to see where the meta lies after that. But the meta feels healthy in like the MO in the leagues and things because like as long like I said, as long as you end up playing against the bird, like the deck, like the rest of the meta feels healthy. It feels fine, and like that's where we're at. We're in this weird waiting room of waiting for the bird to get banned, and Wizards needs to take action sooner rather than later for sure. But I'm interested to see what happens after Nadu gets banned because I think it's all but guaranteed at this point.
Yeah, and of course, like you're saying, like the meta looks pretty good. I mean, there's a lot of like new decks in the format, and there's some old archetypes as well that are performing very well. I've seen, like Murktide Regent decks like perform relatively well. I've seen Yawgmoth decks still kind of hanging around, looking completely different, post MH3, but nonetheless, like still using Yawgmoth to kind of combo and such. So decks like that, the Mardu energy decks and like the other energy decks that we talked about, Eldrazi, Mono Black, being like the big ones. There's a lot of cool stuff going on, and just get Nadu out of the format. Like, don't make people feel like they're incentivized to spend a bunch of money on cards for the best deck in the format when we all know that it's not going to be long for this world. Just let us have a cool meta.
Exactly. Like my biggest thing is that Magic needs to ban it sooner rather than later so that we can go. I don't need like like I said, when we're getting into like the modern RCQ season, people don't want to play that deck or play against it because people don't want to invest money into a deck they know has a target on its head. And it's not like how Ragavan had like a theoretical target on its head where people are like, oh, that card's too broken, it needs to be banned. It's like no, we have people who are playing this deck in pro level highest like the highest level essentially you can play Magic at going the deck needs to be banned. I played this deck, it needs to be banned. Like it's 100% called for by anybody who picks up the deck. Basically, is like, yeah, the deck needs to be banned. And whether it's a content creator, whether it's a pro player, whether it's Frank Carson, who is probably the biggest person against bans, saying it needs to be banned. Like everybody is calling for it. It's not a mob rule calling for it. It's just like we have data and everything to prove this needs to go on.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we're just kind of screwed. we're kind of screwed like in this holding pattern of just waiting, and hopefully we get some sort of announcement potentially next week. If not, we know that sometime in like mid August, around near the start of like RCQ season, they'll end up kind of going back on their word and making a change, a dramatic change at that, to the modern metagame in the middle of the RCQ season.
Exactly, which is why they should do it ahead of the time, and no one's going to be upset they did that, besides people who maybe have already bought into the deck. But it's not, if it's not blatantly obvious that this deck has, excuse me, a target on its head and has like something's going to happen to it, you're either burying your head in the sand or high on copium.
And with that, that's kind of what I had set on the docket for the evening. Randy, is there anything else that you want to talk about? Get off your chest, anything like that?
I don't think so. The only problem I have currently is that mono black, the Necrodominus deck is only going to increasingly make sure that, um, yeah, crap, I lost my train of thought for that deck list.
Good.
Oh, there
Mono
it is.
Black's amazing. Don't talk bad about it.
Oh, no, that because Necrodominus is a card, Shieldred will never lose price tag ever, and will still be an $80 to $100 card, and I'm gonna cry because I don't have any. That's really the only thing I still want to keep talking about is that Shieldred needs to drop and needs a reprint, and then another reprint, and then like 4 more reprints after that, so I can afford to buy them.
When you figure out a solution for the One Ring, we'll figure out a solution for Shieldred.
My solution is that they came in a $40 box that came with 8 packs and a One Ring that was going for $40. You should have bought the boxes.
Oh, it's not the cheapest version, and it's just under $100.
Is it really?
Yep, it's like 95 something on TCG Players. Like the lowest you can buy them is like $95,
All right.
with regular versions being at like $100.
Jesus Christ.
No, don't worry, it's fine. It's okay.
I mean, this is fine. I own my copies. Get wreck nerds.
Fancy pants, Rich McGee over here. Fuck you.
But yeah, I literally bought 4 of the bundles.
Man, whatever. All right.
All right. But no, I don't. Yeah, see, I don't have anything else. I think all this is good to go moving forward. The metagame is fine if we take away Nadu. Kind of what I have from all this.
Oh yeah, we got to see some cool things from the weekend. Unfortunately, it got ruined by a certain bird wizard, but not the cool one with the hat, like the weird one with like the Egyptian theme. But that's going to conclude this episode of the Casual Spikes podcast. Of course, as I said in the beginning, if you want to check out any more content from either of us, they will be my channel's here. You can subscribe right here, and there's a link down in the description below for Randy's channel, and of course annotated somewhere in the beginning. And if you somehow missed it, then you have to venture down into the description to find the link to his channel. Go subscribe. He's doing a lot of stuff for whatever the current RSQ season is, dabbling into Modern Pioneer, going back and forth a little bit. So basically what I do here. So if you're watching and you're from my channel originally and you want more Modern Pioneer stuff, go check out Randy's channel as well, because he is essentially doing the same thing.
Basically, I'm just trying to keep up with any of the new decks that are coming out, explaining why they get played with their card, why they're playing the cards they're playing, etc. I basically try to keep up with all the RCQ seasons that are going on. So right now we're in the Pioneer, so I've gone over a lot of like the big Pioneer decks. There hasn't really been too much shakeup in Pioneer at all. So like right now I'm kind of just focusing on Modern because MH3 just came out, and to a lesser extent, Assassin's Creed set came out that I think has 1 or 2 cards that we'll see play in Modern. So, but I still do focus on our RCQ season of Pioneer. I have a video coming out probably the same day this video comes out of a recent tournament I just did at an RC where I got 2nd place, and a soul crushing defeat, and kind of explain what was going on with that meta. So if you guys want to check that out, feel free to go over to my channel, give a like, subscribe if you want to keep up with everything I'm doing.
Heck yeah. Well, that's gonna do it for the casual spikes here. I'm Dakota. That's Randy. We'll catch you all potentially next weekend, as maybe we will have some sort of announcement, things like that on the modern metagame, and prepare to wind down for the Pioneer RCQ season as we get ever closer and closer. So if you haven't already qualified, get out to your RCQs, pick up a deck. There's plenty of guides between our two channels. You can figure it out. But yeah, we'll catch you all later in the next episode. Peace out.
Peace.